So, across the web, many people have argued that the Halo TV series' cringeworthy shortcomings are the result of the show trying to, as Paramount's chief programmer Tanya Giles put it, swing for a broader audience. Giles wants Halo to be a show that, and I quote, an NFL dad can watch with his 16-year-old son. As a general rule, when people start pandering with overly specific focus group terminology, you know you're in trouble. I sure do hope this YouTube video will appeal to working-class males between the ages of 13 and 35 with some college who also drink beer. In order to ensure that it does, I will, with my world-renowned subtlety, make sure the audience knows I too enjoy popping open a cold one after a long hard day on the clock. You may recall when discussing Halo Infinite and the nearly identical comments Bonnie Ross made about that game reaching a broader audience, I argued that larger economic conditions left publishers no option but to scale back their game's content and dumb down gameplay in order to reach more customers. But I don't think that was the problem with this TV show. This show suffered from the same thing that ruined the Star Wars sequels, Aragon, and Jurassic Park. The same thing which has generally sapped Hollywood of anything resembling an original thought for the last decade, which is that the people working in show business these days, at every level, lack creative ability. Now, Season 1 has been over for a while, and everyone's been pissed off. Season 2 is on the way, and if you've been around for enough game releases, you know this song and dance. There's going to be a build-up with decent trailers, and the Paramount executives are going to talk about how much they learned from Season 1 and yada yada, and everyone's going to go, oh, maybe they'll get it right this time. But I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. Season 2 isn't going to be any better because the problems plaguing this show are systemic. I'm not saying this because I want to be a Debbie Downer. Okay, I want to love every show and game there ever is, but I don't want you guys to get hurt again. Anthem, Battlefield 2042, the Halo Cookbook? We've all been through a lot, okay? Sometimes there's this hot-ass chick that you want to love, but her personality is just too awful, and someone has to sit you down and say, don't do it, man, don't walk into this buzzsaw again. I know Season 2 will be, for the same reason I know that the most popular movie releases in 2025 are going to be superhero sequels. Our nation's artists suck, and it's important we all understand why. Let us begin by stating the obvious. The mistakes this show made were amateurish, and the fan backlash was predictable. Who wouldn't be upset after waiting 10 years for a Halo television series, only to watch it and realize it's not actually a Halo television series? This show took the visuals and first-person pronouns from Halo and shoehorned them into some random story whose plot, themes, and characters are completely divorced from anything to do with Halo. And I get this is an alternative cinematic timeline or whatever, but at a certain point, you've changed so much that it no longer makes sense for it to be an alternate timeline so much as an alternate IP. I mean, imagine if you had like an alternative Star Wars timeline where the Empire and the Rebels aren't fighting over the fate of the Republic, but instead over like, property rights on Alderaan, and Luke Skywalker is fighting the Empire and the Rebels, and he isn't eager for adventure, he doesn't really care about his friends, he just wants to start a family and settle down. And the story is more about like his personal journey towards finding the right girl for him. And there's a Sith Lord working for the Rebels, and we find out that Sith Lords are people too, and they kind of got rid of the whole light side versus dark side exploration of human morality thing, and instead everyone's just super concerned about property rights on Alderaan. Oh, and also, in this timeline, you do not see any stars or any wars. Well, you can imagine actual Star Wars fans sort of scratching their heads, the same way someone might scratch their head if you glued a Ferrari logo on your Prius and started calling it a Ferrari. Well, this is essentially what has taken place with Halo. I mean, you got humans giving orders to the prophets. Okay, this is like if in the Dark Ages, the Catholic Church promoted a heretic to be pope. The whole premise of Halo's story is that the prophets are using religion to control the other alien races, and that the humans' ability to interact with Forerunner tech threatens that belief system. It's a really interesting examination of how religion and technology affect power structures. But obviously, that theme cannot coexist with a human walking around giving covenant orders. This is like having a Nazi general that's openly Jewish. It's a gag that belongs in Family Guy. So boom, that whole theme sacrificed 15 minutes into the first episode. They've turned Halsey and the UNSC into cartoon villains. The major theme of humanity in Halo is basically, how far are people willing to go to survive? Training child super soldiers, ships self-destructing to protect Earth's location, eventually scorching half of Earth's surface itself? It's about the gray areas desperation leads us to, but the show doesn't treat this as a gray area thing so much as like an attempt to sort of cancel the UNSC. There's no indication that humanity is having entire colonies wiped out and losing billions of lives, and maybe the child kidnappings were necessary, but still not cool, yada yada yada. Nah, it's just like, fuck Halsey, Chief is gonna rebel against the humans and fucking hit him with the Me Too hashtag for abusing his new Covenant girlfriend. And of course, the Master Chief's portrayal is itself the ultimate cringe compilation available on streaming right now. They never showed the Chief's face in the games for a goddamn reason. It's an important part of the character's symbolism, and in fact, it's about more than not showing his face. It's about the character itself being mostly a symbol. His armor is named after Thor's hammer, an ancient Norse symbol of protection. His personal name is deliberately the most generic name possible, John. Like how courtrooms refer to John Doe to protect anonymity, he doesn't get a last name, just a number, 117. His whole shtick is supposed to be about selflessness and sacrifice, and part of that is putting aside his individuality in order to protect something bigger than himself. The Master Chief is about stoicism. As the dictionary defines it, the endurance of pain or hardship without the display of feelings and without complaint. It's about knowing he got done dirty as a kid, and knowing that humanity's situation is totally fucked, and carrying on anyways, giving it all he's got anyways, staying calm no matter what so that he can be a symbol of strength and hope for those around him. And doing all this not for fame or fortune, but because it's the right thing to do. It is such a perfect indictment of our times that they didn't think people would relate to the Master Chief if he wasn't a self-absorbed crybaby on some journey of self-discovery. Only some ass clown who got their nuts cut off at the University of Cut Nuts would think this baby-faced fuckhead, who always looks like he's 10 seconds away from bawling his eyes out for no apparent reason, is somehow gonna get me pumped up. Doesn't help that he's always on Twitter playing the world's most annoying Canadian stereotype with all this passive-aggressive peace and love bullshit. The Master Chief this show conjured up is not stoic. He comes across as a grown man behaving like a teenage boy, so obsessively self-centered that not even the fate of humanity is as consequential as his own sense of righteousness and victimhood. Oh, and of course, it's 2023, so he can't just be a tough kid who got trained into a super soldier. He's also got to be born with extra special powers so that he and his new human covenant girlfriend can use their extra super special powers to save humanity, even though humanity's been a bunch of buttheads. Born extra super special, wronged by everyone, morally pure and responsible for nothing. This character embodies a child's narcissism, and could only have been written as a protagonist by emotionally underdeveloped adults who've spent most of their adult lives in giant expensive daycare centers that we all call college. The problem with writers that can't imagine a less self-centered worldview is that the only way they know how to give a story quote-unquote depth is by turning it into a character study, what they call a character-driven story as opposed to a plot-driven one. It's all about getting to know the peeps and seeing them grow as people. Basically, the audience is doing for fictional characters what therapists charge $300 an hour to do in real life. Just sit there and listen to them bitch. But Halo is never going to be a suitable environment for a character study because it is obviously a plot-driven story. It is about aliens trying to wipe out humanity and seeing whether or not humanity survives. It is not some White Lotus shit where the intergalactic conflict is just a useful backdrop for motherfuckers to get to know one another. The intergalactic conflict is the point. And the story was originally told through an action video game in which the player's actions move the story forward, in which the player is exploring the world, not vice versa. Why would you try to adapt that into an introspective? This show should have felt like Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan, not some fucking cheesy Shakespeare shit. The story's themes are bigger than any individual person. It's about a larger sociological exploration of questions that most good sci-fi tries to tackle. Questions about religion, human nature, and our destiny in the stars. They adapted Halo without actually adapting Halo. The result is a product too esoteric for normies and outright insulting to fans. And if the opinion of longtime Halo fans isn't significant, why bother calling it Halo in the first place? They have thread the needle of failure. They have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. But the real question is why? How could such highly trained and well-paid professionals make mistakes that a 13-year-old Redditor could have warned them about? And this is where we get to the root of the problem, which is the failure of the U.S. education system to produce a talented, creative elite. Many scholars today argue we're in a crisis of creativity. Across the board, both children and adults are scoring worse and worse on creativity measurement tests. The pace of new research has slowed, and our arts have largely devolved into a repetitive loop of nostalgia-laced sequels, remakes, and reboots. A variety of explanations have been offered, but the most commonly cited culprit is our grossly outdated education system. In what would go on to be the most viewed TED Talk of all time, the infamous educator Sir Ken Robinson bemoaned the current structure of public education for how it discourages or even outright punishes creative thinking. Over time, his views on the subject have only grown in popularity, and today, a growing chorus of researchers and educators are calling for a near total overhaul of how we train our youth for the future, arguing that the present education model we all rely on isn't adequate for the 21st century. Many of these views were neatly summarized in 2 feature exposés from Time magazine. Taken together, they paint a pretty depressing picture of how bad we're fucking it up. In typical public schooling, we teach to test, and test scores are the primary way we measure ability. The problem is that this kind of education relies almost exclusively on rote memorization and your ability to follow instructions, two skills that research has shown have little impact on creative ability. And indeed, many researchers question whether these kinds of skills are really that useful at all in a world where we all have Google at our fingertips. As Adam Grant, a professor studying the issue at Wharton School of Business, would put it, and I quote, "Practice makes perfect, but it doesn't make new. It's one thing to master something that is already known, like repeating a Mozart melody with precision, but it's an entirely different skill set to be able to come up with that kind of melody on your own." Meanwhile, skill sets that are associated with creativity, such as originality, spontaneity, and independent thinking, are not useful for passing tests at all, and in fact are more likely to hurt your test scores than anything. In the 1950s, when Paul Torrance first introduced the Torrance test, a survey that measures creativity in the same way that an IQ test measures intelligence, he and other researchers found that high scores on the creativity measurement were 3 times as likely to predict a child's future professional success as measured by the publication of artistic works, research, patents filed, and lectures given than high scores on the IQ test. But things have changed since the time of Torrance. During his lifetime, scores on the Torrance test gradually increased each year, with the decline beginning only in the last 2 decades. This downward shift correlates with a number of other changes we've seen since the 90s, changes in the amount of free time students have both in school and at home, and significant changes in education policy such as the 2002 No Child Left Behind Act, a controversial law that tied schools' funding directly to kids' scores on standardized testing, putting more pressure than ever before on educators to focus exclusively on teaching to test, ultimately leaving less and less opportunity for the kinds of practices that we know cultivate creativity, such as self-directed learning and free play. And behaviors that research has correlated to creative ability often result in shitty grades and disciplinary problems at school, things like nonconformity, impulsiveness, independence, and disregard for authority. Today, when colleges make changes to their application process to test for creative ability, they end up accepting many students who would have otherwise been rejected. As Robert Sternberg, professor at Cornell University, puts it, our current system produces a lot of kids who are smart, but they're smart in the way of tell me what to do and I'll do it really well. You give them a structure and they'll work well within that structure, but what the world really needs is kids who can create the structure. Thus, we have an academic system that isn't just failing to train creativity, but is in fact weeding out those poor souls who end up being creative anyways, because due to the rise of the national obsession with credentialism, in which grades and degrees make this education system the ultimate gatekeeper to working on a show like the Halo TV series, the only way someone could be working in this kind of high-profile creative field is if they conform to this outdated education system, which specifically requires that they abandon creative thinking. And I think you can see the results of this kind of shit in the Halo TV show. You can see the highly structured sort of formula they had, almost as if they were looking for an instruction manual. They looked at the focus group research, decided it needed to appeal to kids and working dads who drink beer or whatever. They said, okay, Group A likes Halo, but Group B needs to understand it. So we'll use all the familiar aesthetics for the kids, but dumb down the storyline for dad. And to even conceive of the idea in the first place, what they did was they said, okay, Mandalorian is a huge sci-fi hit, benefiting from a pre-existing fan base. The Expanse is a huge sci-fi hit adaptation, benefiting from a pre-existing fan base. And you can almost see them processing it like an algebra problem on a standardized test. If X plus Y equals successful show, and X is sci-fi, and Y is pre-existing fan base, how do you get the result? Successful show? Do Halo, because it's a sci-fi hit with a pre-existing fan base. There you go. Oh. But creativity isn't about following instructions, because the whole fucking point is originality. The whole point is that it's not something there can be instructions for because it hasn't been done yet, goddammit. True artists would call this formulaic way of thinking derivative and unoriginal, which used to be the most insulting thing you could say to an artist, but now it's the only way you can get something published. But an even bigger problem than our style of education is the rise of wealth inequality and nepotism over the last few decades. Because the cost of college has exploded and the bottom 3/5 of Americans by income have grown poorer and are going to college less, the pool of creatively gifted individuals that companies can hire from is shrinking. Today, even elite universities like Harvard have legacy admissions making up a third of its student body, and with so-called Nepo babies taking up more and more positions based on their personal connections rather than actual ability, the end result is a kind of hereditary lottery in which the writers, producers, actors, and even business executives have achieved their station in life based mostly on who their parents were. But a parent's ability is not a strong predictor of their children's ability. This is why we had to give up monarchy. Thus, you have an influx of average or even mediocre intellects making their way to professional positions that they just aren't qualified for. Not just creative positions, but every position. The CEOs and accountants and data guys and programmers, and the result is mediocre output. The result is superhero movies, Battlefield 2042, and the Halo TV show. The only reason something like the Halo TV show or Anthem gets made and then released is because every single person involved was incompetent, not just the creatives. Everyone's talking about abolish student debt. Come on. Everyone's thinking, and I'm just going to say it, we got to abolish college. People out there have dropped 150 G's on an education that I got for free, getting drunk and reading Twitter threads. And while you're out there writing letters to your fucking congressman on your knees, begging him like a bitch to get you out of debt, I'm out here kicking ass, playing Rainbow Six Siege and jerking off to your sister. I knew this girl who got knocked up real early. She was tough as nails, got herself through college as a single mother. Her ass is still on OnlyFans doing the herky-jerky for a bunch of strangers so she can give the kid money for shark cards on GTA. And all you fucking college graduates who spent 4 years bent over on all fours, wearing nothing but khakis and a bow tie, licking your professor's ass while he purred like a kitty and told you how insightful your questions were. And you got your sacred college experience, which was just partying with a bunch of other brats getting ferried around in Uber SUVs from one fucking McMansion to the other, and now you're an adult? Because you did some coke and had a threesome and your boyfriend slaps you sometimes when you're screwing, and now you spend your days having temper tantrums on Twitter that start with some shit like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but you guys don't fucking get it, because life is getting boring and so are fucking you. And you're really pissed off about it, but you don't know how to be interesting, because after 4 years, the only thing you actually learned is how to do what you're told. You fuckers are the root of all mediocrity. This bullshit TV series, the Star Wars sequel, is the flaccid dick that is the Democratic Party. All this stomach-churning disappointment can be traced back to you teachers' pet pieces of shit who got your piece of paper telling you you're qualified, when really the only thing you ever created in your life is class presentations that your audience was literally required to watch, and the teacher gave you an A, which pumped you up, even though the only way you could have gotten anything less than an A is if you went up there and literally shit on the floor. And now you're taking these sacred parts of people's childhoods, these cherished memories, these special little beacons of hope and meaning in a dark and cruel world, and you're just taking a dump on them to make a quick buck, and you're doing it with all the dignity of second graders delivering a book report on Harry Potter, while every kid in the class counts the minutes till this nightmare is over. And fucking Pablo doesn't care about Halo or Halo fans. He just really needs the W on this one, because Lord knows Lorelai was a fucking stinker, and now everyone's all up in arms about it. Watch every clown involved in this production do what every narcissistic piece of shit always does and play the victim and cry about how abusive all the bullies were. And maybe if you're lucky, the teacher will send me to the office, you little 10-year-old fuckstains. You know what George Bush, Harvey Weinstein, and Vladimir Putin all have in common? College degrees. You know who didn't go to college? Jesus.